Blood, crimson and thick, dripped between Bethany Montgomery's fingers as she staggered up the final steps of the rickety porch, her vision swimming with each labored breath. The bullet wound in her side had finally taken its toll after her desperate 3-mile trek across the unforgiving Texas plains. The year was 1876, and the West was still wild in every sense of the word. Bethany had fled her homestead after a gang of outlaws, the notorious Blackwell Brothers, had descended upon her family's small ranch. They'd killed her father, burned their home to the ground, and she'd barely escaped with her life, a slug buried in her flesh as a parting gift. The isolated ranch house before her was her last hope. She had no idea who lived there, but smoke curled from the chimney, promising human presence. Her legs finally gave way as she reached the door, her body collapsing with a thud against the weathered wood. The last thing Bethany remembered was the sound of heavy boots approaching before darkness claimed her. Finn Calloway had been cooking a simple dinner of beans and salt pork when he heard the noise on his porch. Living alone for the past 3 years since his return from fighting in the war had made him cautious. He grabbed his Winchester rifle from beside the door before carefully opening it, prepared for trouble. What he found instead was a woman, no more than 25, lying unconscious in a pool of her own blood. Her chestnut hair fanned around her head like a halo, her face pale as the moon that was just beginning to rise over the Texas horizon. "Good Lord," he whispered, immediately setting his rifle aside and kneeling beside her. His fingers found a pulse weak but present at her throat. With gentle hands, he turned her slightly to locate the source of the bleeding. The bullet wound in her side looked angry and raw. Finn scooped her up carefully, carrying her into his modest home. "Hold on," he murmured as he laid her on his bed. "I promise you'll be all right." Something about her face, even in unconsciousness, stirred something in him he'd thought long dead. "I'll take care of you," he whispered. "For as long as you need." He had no idea who she was or what trouble had found her, but in that moment, Finn Calloway made a silent vow to the stranger bleeding on his bed. He would protect her with his life. Bethany floated in and out of consciousness as fever gripped her in the days that followed. Sometimes she saw a man's face, strong-jawed with piercing blue eyes and sandy hair that fell across his forehead. Other times she relived the horror of watching her father fall, his body riddled with bullets as he tried to give her time to escape. "Papa," she cried out on the third night, sitting bolt upright, her body slick with sweat. "Easy now," came a deep, gentle voice. Strong hands pressed her shoulders, guiding her back to the pillows. "You're safe here." Bethany's vision cleared enough to see the man who had been caring for her. He sat on the edge of the bed, a cool cloth in his hand. The lamplight cast shadows across the planes of his face, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass and eyes filled with concern. "Where am I?" she managed, her throat raw from disuse. "My ranch, about 15 miles east of Cottonwood Springs," he replied, bringing a cup of water to her lips. "I'm Finn Calloway. You collapsed on my porch 4 days ago with a bullet in your side." Bethany sipped the water gratefully. "Bethany Montgomery," she whispered. "Thank you for helping me." "No need for thanks," Finn said, his voice a comforting rumble in the quiet room. "Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head weakly. "Not anyone, not these days." A sad smile touched his lips. "Perhaps you're right about that." He adjusted the blanket over her. "The bullet went clean through. You lost a fair amount of blood, but the wound is healing well. Another week of rest, and you should be on the mend." "I don't have a week," Bethany said, attempting to sit up again, only to be halted by a stabbing pain in her side. "They might still be looking for me." Finn's expression darkened. "Who's looking for you, Miss Montgomery?" "The Blackwell Brothers," she said, watching his face carefully. Most people in this part of Texas reacted with fear at the mere mention of the notorious gang. "They killed my father and burned our ranch. I'm all that's left." Instead of fear, a cold determination settled over Finn's features. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "This place isn't easy to find, and I've got plenty of ammunition if trouble comes calling." He stood, adjusting the curtain to look out into the darkness. "Rest now. We can talk more in the morning." As he turned to leave, Bethany caught his wrist. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, calloused from years of hard work. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Finn looked down at her hand on his, then met her eyes. Something passed between them, an unspoken understanding that neither could quite name. "Because," he said softly, "I made you a promise when you collapsed on my porch, and I'm a man of my word." With that, he gently extracted his wrist from her grasp and moved to the chair beside the bed where he'd apparently been keeping vigil. "Sleep, Miss Montgomery, I'll be right here." Too exhausted to argue, Bethany allowed her eyes to close, feeling safer than she had in weeks. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows when Bethany awakened. She found herself alone in the small bedroom, but could hear movement in another part of the house. Testing her strength, she slowly pushed herself to a sitting position, gritting her teeth against the pain. She took the opportunity to examine her surroundings. The room was Spartan but clean, with a chest of drawers, a small mirror on the wall, and a hook where a gun belt hung. The bed she occupied was sturdy and comfortable, clearly the best piece of furniture in the house. Bethany realized with embarrassment that she was wearing a man's shirt far too large for her frame, and nothing else save for the bandages around her middle. Her own clothing, she assumed, had been too blood-soaked to salvage. A knock at the door startled her. "Miss Montgomery, are you awake?" Finn's voice called from the other side. "Yes," she replied, pulling the blanket higher. "You can come in." The door opened, and Finn entered carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of what smelled like oatmeal and a cup of coffee. He looked as if he'd already been up for hours, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing tanned, muscular forearms. "Thought you might be hungry," he said, setting the tray on her lap once she'd adjusted herself. "Nothing fancy, but it'll help you get your strength back." "Thank you," Bethany said, suddenly aware of how famished she was. She took a spoonful of the oatmeal, finding it sweetened with a bit of honey. "This is good," Finn nodded, taking a seat in the chair beside the bed. "I'm no cook, but I managed not to poison myself." A hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Better," she admitted. "Still weak, but the pain isn't as sharp." "Good." He watched her eat for a moment before continuing. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of washing your dress. It's drying out back. The bloodstains wouldn't all come out, I'm afraid." Bethany felt her cheeks warm. "And I suppose you're the one who—" She gestured to her current state of dress. A flush crept up Finn's neck. "I did what was necessary to tend your wound, madam. Nothing more. I assure you, your virtue remains intact." Despite everything, Bethany felt a small smile tugging at her lips. "I wasn't accusing you, Mr. Calloway, merely thanking you for your care." He nodded, seemingly relieved. "You mentioned the Blackwells last night," he said, changing the subject. "They're a dangerous lot. Been terrorizing these parts for the better part of 2 years now. They wanted our land," Bethany explained, setting down her spoon. "My father refused to sell, said he'd built that ranch with his own 2 hands and would die before letting anyone take it from us." Her voice caught. "He kept his word on that score." Finn's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Montgomery." "Bethany," she corrected. "After what you've done for me, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Bethany," he repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Finn," she nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was strong and bitter, but warming. "What will you do with me once I'm healed, Finn?" He looked surprised by the question. "I hadn't given it much thought. What would you like to do?" Bethany considered this. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. Her father's ranch was gone, and she had no other family to speak of. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "I have an aunt in St. Louis, but we haven't spoken in years." Finn seemed to hesitate before speaking. "You're welcome to stay here until you decide." "It's not much, but there's a roof and food." "I couldn't impose, it's no imposition," he interrupted. "Truth is, it gets lonely out here. Company would be welcome." There was something in his eyes when he said this, a vulnerability that belied his strong exterior. Bethany found herself wondering about the man who had saved her life. What had brought him to this isolated ranch? Why did he live alone? "Thank you," she said simply. "I accept your offer, at least until I'm back on my feet." Finn nodded, standing to take the tray once she'd finished eating. "Get some more rest. The more you sleep, the faster you'll heal." As he turned to leave, Bethany called after him. "Finn, why do you live all the way out here by yourself?" He paused at the door, his back to her. For a moment, she thought he might not answer. Then, without turning, he said quietly, Some men return from war with more than just physical scars, Bethany. Sometimes solitude is the only peace we can find. With that cryptic response, he left the room, leaving Bethany with more questions than answers about her mysterious rescuer. Over the next few days, Bethany's strength gradually returned. By the fifth day, she was able to sit in a chair by the window, watching as Finn tended to his small herd of cattle and mended fences. She learned that he ran a modest operation, just enough to sustain himself and sell a few head each year for necessities he couldn't produce himself. On the seventh day, Bethany ventured outside for the first time, wrapped in a blanket against the spring chill. Finn had fashioned a seat for her on the porch, arranging cushions on a wooden chair so she could sit comfortably. "The fresh air will do you good," he said, helping her settle. "Just don't overdo it." From her vantage point, Bethany could see the full extent of Finn's property. The ranch house itself was modest but well built, with a small barn and corral nearby. Beyond stretched acres of grazing land, bordered by a creek to the east and rolling hills to the north. It was beautiful in its simplicity, reminding her of her father's place before it was destroyed. "You've built something special here," she commented as Finn brought her a cup of tea. He looked out over his land with a mixture of pride and something like melancholy. "It's taken 3 years to get it to this point. When I bought it, there was nothing but the shell of the house and overgrazed pasture." "Where were you before that?" Bethany asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more about him. Finn leaned against the porch railing, his gaze distant. "I fought for the Union. After the war, I drifted for a while, worked as a hired hand on ranches from Missouri to New Mexico." He took a breath. "Then I decided it was time to put down roots. No family," she ventured. "Lost my parents before the war, no siblings." He glanced at her. "What about you, just your father?" Bethany nodded. "My mother died of fever when I was 14. It was just Papa and me after that, working the ranch together." "He taught you well," Finn observed. "I've seen the calluses on your hands. You're no stranger to hard work." "Papa didn't believe in raising a helpless daughter," she said with a small smile. "He said a woman should know how to shoot, ride, and run a household with equal skill." Finn returned her smile. "Sounds like a wise man." "He was," Bethany said, her throat tightening. The grief was still raw, but talking about her father felt good, like keeping his memory alive. They fell into a comfortable silence, watching as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A hawk circled overhead, its cry piercing the quiet. "Will they come looking for me?" Bethany finally asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. Finn's expression hardened. "The Blackwells, hard to say. They might think you died in the fire, or they might not care enough to hunt down one woman." "They might," she said quietly. "I saw their faces. I could identify them to the law." Finn considered this. "The nearest town with a proper sheriff is 2 days' ride from here, and even then the law can be selective about who it chooses to pursue." "You mean they're paid off," Bethany said bitterly. "Some are," Finn acknowledged. "Not all, but enough to make justice hard to come by." Bethany stared into her tea, watching the steam rise and dissipate. "I can't hide forever." "No," Finn agreed, "but you can heal first, then decide what to do." He straightened up from the railing. "In the meantime, you're safe here. I give you my word on that." There was such conviction in his voice that Bethany couldn't help but believe him. Despite having known him for such a short time, she trusted Finn Calloway implicitly. Perhaps it was because he'd saved her life, or perhaps it was something more, something in the quiet strength he exuded and the gentle way he'd cared for her. "I believe you," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Finn was the first to look away, clearing his throat. "I should check on the horses before dark," he said, moving toward the steps. "Will you be all right out here for a bit?" "I'll be fine," Bethany assured him. "Take your time." As she watched him walk toward the barn, his long strides eating up the distance, Bethany felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with her healing wound. It was a sensation she hadn't experienced before, a warmth that spread through her at the mere sight of him. It was dangerous, she knew, to develop feelings for the man who had rescued her. She was vulnerable, grateful, and he was the only human contact she'd had in days. It would be easy to mistake gratitude for something deeper. And yet, as the sun set and Finn's silhouette moved against the darkening sky, Bethany couldn't deny that what she felt was beginning to transcend simple thankfulness. The following week brought a steady improvement in Bethany's condition. She progressed from short walks around the porch to helping with simple chores inside the house. Finn had insisted she continue to take his bed while he slept on a pallet in the main room, despite her protests. One morning, she awoke to the sound of unfamiliar voices outside. Alarmed, she pulled on the dress Finn had repaired for her, stitching up the bullet hole and washing out as much of the blood as possible, and cautiously made her way to the main room. Finn stood by the door, his rifle casually but visibly in hand, speaking to two men on horseback. Bethany hung back, listening. "Just passing through," one of the men was saying. He was older, with a grizzled beard and weather-beaten face. "Thought we'd check if you had any work needing done. Times are hard." "Appreciate the offer," Finn replied, his tone polite but guarded, "but I manage fine on my own." The second man, younger with a pockmarked face, leaned forward in his saddle. "Heard there was some trouble over at the Montgomery place about 2 weeks back. You know anything about that?" Bethany's heart hammered in her chest. Were these men connected to the Blackwells? Finn's posture remained relaxed, but Bethany noticed his grip tighten slightly on his rifle. "News travels slow out here. Haven't heard anything. What kind of trouble?" "Place was burned to the ground," the older man said. "Old Montgomery was found dead, daughters missing. Some say the Blackwells were involved." "That's so." Finn's voice betrayed nothing. "Shame about Montgomery. Heard he was a decent sort." The younger man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seen any strangers passing through recently? Woman, maybe. Mid-20s, chestnut hair." "Can't say that I have," Finn replied evenly. "Don't get many visitors out this way. That's why I chose the spot." The men exchanged glances. "Well," the older one said, "if you do see anything unusual, might be worth mentioning next time you're in town. There's talk of a reward for information about the Montgomery girl." "I'll keep that in mind," Finn said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. "Safe travels, gentlemen." The men tipped their hats and turned their horses, riding slowly away from the ranch. Finn stood watching until they disappeared over the rise, then closed the door, his expression grim. "Friends of yours?" Bethany asked, stepping into view. Finn's head snapped up, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Never seen them before," he said, "and I doubt they're looking for you out of concern for your well-being." "They mentioned a reward," Bethany said, moving to the window to peer through the curtains. "Who would offer money to find me?" "The Blackwells, most likely," Finn replied, joining her at the window. "If you're the only witness to what they did, they'd want to tie up that loose end." A shiver ran down Bethany's spine. "So they know I survived. Seems that way." Finn's face was inches from hers as they both looked out, his breath warm on her cheek. "But they don't know where you are, and those men didn't recognize you, or they wouldn't have ridden away so easily." Bethany turned to face him, suddenly aware of their proximity. "You lied to protect me." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I did." "Why?" she whispered. The question encompassed more than just his deception to the strangers. Why had he taken her in? Why did he continue to risk himself for her? Finn didn't look away. "Because from the moment I found you on my porch, something told me you were worth protecting." His voice dropped lower. "And I haven't had anything worth protecting in a very long time." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotions. Bethany was acutely aware of every detail of his face: the small scar above his right eyebrow, the golden stubble along his jaw, the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. Part of her hoped he would. Instead, Finn stepped back, breaking the spell. "Those men might come back," he said, "all business now, or others like them. We need to be prepared." Bethany nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of disappointment in her chest. "What should we do?" "First," Finn said, moving to a trunk in the corner of the room, "we make sure you can defend yourself." He unlocked the trunk and pulled out a small revolver. "Can you shoot?" "Papa taught me," she confirmed. "I'm decent with a rifle, less so with a handgun." "This was my mother's," Finn said, checking the cylinder before handing it to her. "Smith & Wesson Model 2. It's lighter than most, good for smaller hands." He watched as she tested the weight of it. "We'll practice later, get you comfortable with it." Bethany examined the weapon. It was well maintained, the metal gleaming in the morning light. "Thank you," she said, understanding the significance of him giving her his mother's gun. "Second," Finn continued, "we need to consider whether staying here is the safest option for you." Bethany looked up sharply. "You want me to leave?" "No," he said quickly, then more softly, "No, that's not what I want, but my priority is keeping you safe." "I feel safe here," Bethany said, setting the revolver on the table. "With you." Something flickered in Finn's eyes, hope perhaps, or yearning. But he mastered it quickly. "For now, we'll stay vigilant. I'll teach you the signals I use, different ways to approach the house that let me know if something's wrong." He moved to the stove, stoking the fire beneath the coffee pot. "And we'll come up with a plan for if trouble finds us." As they discussed strategies and hiding places, Bethany couldn't help but notice how naturally they worked together, finishing each other's thoughts and building on each other's ideas. Despite the danger that had brought them together, there was something comforting about planning their defense as a unit. By midday, they had established protocols and backup plans. Finn had shown her a hidden cellar beneath the floorboards where she could hide if necessary, and they'd agreed on signals and meeting points should they become separated. "You're good at this," Bethany remarked as they sat at the table cleaning guns. "Planning, I mean." A shadow crossed Finn's face. "War teaches you to anticipate the worst and to be ready when it comes." Bethany's hands stilled on the cloth she was using to oil the revolver. "Was it very terrible? The war?" Finn was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if he were seeing something beyond the walls of the cabin. "There are no words for what it was," he said quietly. "Men dying in droves, sometimes for a few yards of mud, the sounds, the smells." He shook his head. "I was at Shiloh, Vicksburg, Atlanta. By the end, I barely remembered the boy who'd signed up thinking he was going to be a hero." Bethany reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. His skin was warm and rough beneath her fingers. "I'm sorry." Finn looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm up, entwining his fingers with hers. "Don't be. The war is what brought me here, and if I hadn't been here, I would have died on your porch," Bethany finished. Their eyes met across the table, hands still joined. In that moment, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that her feelings for Finn Calloway had moved far beyond gratitude. She was falling in love with him, his quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like coming home. A sudden bark from outside broke the moment. Finn was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. "Dog's alerting to something," he said, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside." Bethany's heart raced as she watched him slip out the door, gun at the ready. She picked up the revolver, checking that it was loaded, and moved to a position where she could see through the window while remaining hidden. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. Finally, Finn reappeared, his posture relaxed. "Just a deer wandering too close to the house," he reported as he came back inside. "But it's good to know the dog earns his keep." Bethany lowered the revolver, relief washing over her. "I thought they might have come back." "They might eventually," Finn said, setting his rifle back in its place. "But we'll be ready." The intensity of the moment had passed, but something had shifted between them. They moved around each other with a new awareness, their eyes meeting more frequently, touches lingering longer than necessary. That night, as Bethany lay in Finn's bed, she could hear him moving about in the main room, checking locks and windows before settling on his pallet. The house creaked and settled around them, the wind whispering through the eaves. Despite the potential danger that lurked beyond the walls, Bethany felt a profound sense of peace. Whatever came, they would face it together. And in that certainty, she found unexpected joy. Days stretched into weeks, and spring blossomed fully across the Texas landscape. Bethany's wound healed completely, leaving only a puckered scar as evidence of her ordeal. As her strength returned, she insisted on taking on more responsibilities around the ranch. Finn initially protested, but soon realized that Bethany was not one to be idle. They fell into a comfortable routine, Finn handling the livestock and heavier work, while Bethany tended the small garden, cooked meals that far surpassed his own basic fare. and helped with whatever tasks she could manage. They practiced shooting regularly, Bethany's skill with the revolver improving until she could hit targets consistently at reasonable distances. Finn taught her to ride his second horse, a steady mare named Daisy, in case she needed to make a quick escape. Through it all, their bond deepened. They shared stories over dinner, Bethany speaking of her childhood in Missouri before her family moved west, Finn cautiously revealing snippets of his past. They discovered a shared love of reading, taking turns with Finn's small collection of books in the evenings. It was during one such evening, nearly a month after Bethany had collapsed on his porch, that their relationship took another turn. They sat before the fireplace, Bethany mending a shirt while Finn read aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Last of the Mohicans. History, like love, is so apt to surround her heroes with an atmosphere of imaginary brightness, Finn read, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Bethany looked up from her sewing. Do you believe that's true, that we see what we want to see in those we? She hesitated. In those we care for, Finn closed the book, keeping his place with a finger. I think there's truth in it, he said thoughtfully. We often attribute qualities to people based on our own hopes and fears. He met her eyes. But sometimes the reality exceeds what we imagined possible. The implication hung in the air between them. Bethany set her mending aside, her heart pounding. Finn, she began, not entirely sure what she meant to say. He saved her from having to decide by setting the book down and moving to sit beside her on the small sofa. Bethany, he said, his voice rough with emotion, I need to say something and I hope you'll hear me out. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. When I found you on my porch that day, I had no idea how completely you would change my life, he continued. I've been alone for so long, convinced that solitude was all I deserved after the things I'd seen and done in the war. Finn took her hands in his eyes never leaving hers. But these weeks with you have shown me that there can be more. That perhaps I'm not condemned to live out my days in isolation. You're not, Bethany whispered, squeezing his hands. I know we met under extraordinary circumstances, he went on, and I've tried to tell myself that what I feel for you is just the natural result of our situation. But it's more than that. He took a deep breath. I'm falling in love with you, Bethany Montgomery, and it terrifies me. Joy bloomed in Bethany's chest, so intense it was almost painful. Why does it terrify you? Because I have nothing to offer you, Finn said, pain evident in his voice. A small ranch, a simple life, a man who still wakes in the night fighting battles long over. Bethany reached up, cradling his face in her hands. You've offered me everything, Finn Calloway, protection, respect, understanding. She leaned closer. I'm falling in love with you too. Not because you rescued me, but because of the man you are every day since. The barriers between them finally crumbled. Finn pulled her to him, his lips finding hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with weeks of pent-up longing. Bethany's arms wound around his neck as she returned his kiss with equal fervor, her body molding against his. When they finally parted, both breathless, Finn rested his forehead against hers. I never expected to find you, he murmured. I never expected to be found, she replied, running her fingers through his sandy hair. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other's arms before the fire, talking softly about possibilities and dreams that had seemed impossible just weeks before. Finn spoke of expanding the ranch, building a proper home. Bethany shared her vision of a garden and perhaps, someday, children. It was a perfect moment, a pocket of peace in an uncertain world. Neither of them wanted it to end. But end it did, with the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching in the darkness. Finn was on his feet instantly, extinguishing the lamp and moving to the window. Bethany joined him, peering through the gap in the curtains. In the moonlight, they could make out 3 riders approaching the ranch house. Get your revolver, Finn said quietly, and be ready to use the cellar if I give the signal. Bethany nodded, retrieving the weapon from its place in the drawer. Her hands were steady despite the fear coursing through her. The declaration of love between them had changed something fundamental now. They truly had something to lose. Finn checked his own weapon before moving to the door. Stay back, he instructed. If it goes badly, promise me you'll run. Take Daisy and head northwest toward the hill country. There's a settlement called Fairview about 30 miles that way. I won't leave you, Bethany protested. Finn's eyes were resolute. If it comes to it, you will. Promise me, Bethany. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I promise. Satisfied, Finn positioned himself beside the door as the riders drew up outside. The dog barked furiously until a sharp whistle from Finn quieted him. Calloway, a voice called from outside. We know you're in there. Come on out. We just want to talk. Finn didn't respond, merely signaled for Bethany to stay hidden. We know about the woman, Calloway, the voice continued. The Montgomery girl, those fellows who passed through here last month, they work for us. Bethany's blood ran cold. The Blackwells had found her. We're prepared to be reasonable, the man outside called. Send her out and we'll leave you be. Keep your ranch, keep your life. Just hand over the witness. Finn's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. You've got 1 minute to decide, the voice warned. Or we burn this place to the ground with both of you in it. Bethany moved to Finn's side, her decision made. I should go out there, she whispered. They'll kill you otherwise. Finn's eyes flashed with determination. Not a chance, he growled. We stick to the plan. He glanced toward the trapdoor that led to the hidden cellar. Get down there now. But now, Bethany, he insisted. Trust me. The urgency in his voice convinced her. With a quick kiss to his cheek, she moved to the concealed door in the floor, lifting it silently and descending into the darkness below. Finn closed it after her, sliding a rug over the spot to conceal it. From her hiding place, Bethany could hear muffled voices as Finn apparently opened the door to confront the visitors. She strained to make out the words, her hand tight around the revolver, searching for Weeks. One voice said, "Not your concern." Came Finn's reply, "Last chance." The voices grew more heated. Then, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot shattered the night. Bethany bit back a scream, her entire body tensing. More shots followed, along with shouts and the crash of breaking glass. Tears streamed down her face as she listened to the chaos above, desperate to help but knowing she would only make things worse by revealing herself. Then, silence fell. Heavy footsteps moved across the floor above her head. Search the place, a gruff voice ordered. She's here somewhere. Bethany held her breath as boots thudded around the house. Drawers were opened and closed, furniture moved. Someone walked directly over the trapdoor, the boards creaking under their weight. Nothing in the bedroom, another voice reported. Keep looking, the first man snapped. Check outside. Maybe there's a root cellar or outbuilding. The footsteps receded, and Bethany allowed herself to breathe again. Finn had to be alive. They wouldn't still be searching if they'd gotten what they wanted from him. But was he injured? Captured? She remained frozen in place, listening as the men continued their search. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, she heard voices again, closer this time. No sign of her, someone reported. She must have run when she heard us coming. Calloway ain't talking, another voice added. Tough son of a bitch, bring him outside, the apparent leader ordered. We'll make him talk. Bethany's heart raced. They had Finn, and they were going to hurt him to find her. She couldn't let that happen, not after everything he'd done for her. Not when she loved him. Moving silently, Bethany positioned herself beneath the trapdoor, the revolver ready in her hand. She would wait until they took Finn outside, then emerge and try to get a clear shot. It was a desperate plan, but she couldn't think of any alternative. The sound of a scuffle above told her they were moving Finn. She counted to 30, giving them time to get outside, then carefully pushed up on the trapdoor. It didn't budge. Panic flooded her as she pushed harder. Something heavy had been placed on top of the door deliberately or by chance, she couldn't tell. But she was trapped. Muffled voices came from outside now, too distant to make out clearly. She pushed against the trapdoor with all her strength, but it was useless. Tears of frustration streamed down her face as she realized she was powerless to help the man she loved. Then, a new sound penetrated her despair, more hoofbeats, approaching fast. Many horses, by the sound of it. Shouts of alarm rose from the men outside. It's the law, scatter. More gunshots echoed, these sounding different from before, an organized volley rather than chaotic exchange. The sounds of combat continued for several minutes, then gradually died away. Bethany held her breath, straining to hear what was happening. Footsteps approached the house again, heavier than before. Calloway, An unfamiliar voice called, "You in there," silence. "Check the house," the voice ordered. "And someone tend to that fellow by the barn, he's still breathing." Bethany's heart leapt. Could Finn be alive? The weight above the trapdoor suddenly shifted, and light flooded in as it was lifted away. Bethany raised her revolver, prepared to fire if necessary. "Whoa there, miss." A startled face appeared in the opening, a middle-aged man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest. "We're the law." "You can put that down." Bethany lowered the gun slightly. "Where's Finn? Is he alive?" "If you mean the rancher, yes, madam, he's alive," the sheriff confirmed. "Took a bullet to the shoulder, but the doc's seeing to him now." Relief made her dizzy as she accepted the sheriff's hand to climb out of the cellar. "The Blackwells, 2 dead, 1 wounded and in custody," the sheriff reported grimly. "We've been tracking them for months. Got a tip they were headed this way." Bethany barely registered his words as she rushed outside. In the yard, lit by lanterns, she saw Finn sitting on a crate while an older man bandaged his shoulder. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale, but his eyes were alert. "Finn," she cried, running to him. He looked up, relief washing over his features. "Bethany," he breathed, reaching for her with his good arm. Thank God. She fell to her knees beside him, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder as she embraced him. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered against his neck. "Never," he murmured, holding her tightly. "I promised you forever, remember, the day you collapsed on my porch." Bethany pulled back to look at him, confused. "You never said that." A smile touched his lips despite his pain. "I did. You were unconscious, but I made that promise all the same." His eyes held hers intently. "And I meant it." The sheriff approached, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Miss Montgomery, we'll need your statement about what happened to your father and his ranch." Bethany nodded, not taking her eyes from Finn's face. "Of course, but first." She leaned forward, kissing Finn softly, mindful of his injuries but needing to reassure herself that he was truly alive. He responded immediately, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. When they parted, the sheriff was looking studiously elsewhere, his face flushed. "I'll give you folks a minute," he mumbled, walking back toward his deputies. Finn chuckled, then winced as the movement jarred his shoulder. "Not exactly how I plan to introduce you to the neighbors." Bethany laughed through her tears. "I don't care who sees. I love you, Finn Calloway." "And I love you, Bethany Montgomery," he replied, his eyes shining in the lantern light. "Enough to make another promise if you'll have it." "What promise?" she asked, though her heart already knew. "Marry me," Finn said simply. "Not because you need protection, or because I saved you, but because we found each other when neither of us was looking. Because I want to build a life with you here on this land." Joy bubbled up inside Bethany, pure and overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I'll marry you." Finn's smile was radiant despite his pallor. "The preacher comes through Cottonwood Springs once a month. We could ride in, make it official." "As soon as you're healed," Bethany agreed, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. The doctor, who had been pretending not to listen, spoke up. "That'll be a few weeks at least, young man. That bullet tore up some muscle. You'll need rest." Finn looked at Bethany, his expression turning mischievous. "Seems I'll need a nurse." "Seems you will," she agreed, matching his tone. The next few hours passed in a blur as statements were taken. The wounded Blackwell brother was secured for transport, and the bodies of the others were loaded onto horses. The sheriff promised to return the following day with more men to help repair the damage to the ranch house, which had several broken windows and bullet holes in the walls by dawn. The law had departed, leaving Finn and Bethany alone once more. The doctor had given Finn something for the pain before leaving, and he was drowsy but insisted on staying awake until they were truly safe. "You should rest," Bethany said, helping him to bed. "It's over now." Finn caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Stay," he murmured, "just to sleep. I need to know you're safe beside me." Bethany hesitated only a moment before climbing onto the bed beside him, careful not to disturb his bandaged shoulder. Finn's good arm wrapped around her, pulling her close against his side. "When I heard that shot and thought they might have killed you," Bethany whispered, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I know," Finn soothed, "but we're both here. We survived." Bethany nestled closer. "And now we can begin." "Yes," Finn agreed, his voice fading as sleep began to claim him. "Now we can begin." As sunlight filtered through the bullet-riddled curtains, Bethany watched Finn's face relax into sleep. Despite everything, the danger, the violence, the uncertainty, she felt a profound sense of peace. They had found each other against impossible odds. And whatever the future held, they would face it together. 3 weeks later, Bethany stood before the small mirror in Finn's bedroom, their bedroom, now adjusting the simple white dress she had sewn from fabric purchased in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and new, and it made her feel like a bride. Finn's shoulder had healed enough for travel, and they had ridden into Cottonwood Springs the previous day to meet with the circuit preacher. The wedding was set for noon at the small church on the edge of town. Nothing elaborate, just the two of them, the preacher, and a handful of townspeople who had been intrigued by their story. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Bethany, are you decent?" Finn's voice called. "Yes, come in," she replied, turning as he entered. Finn stopped in the doorway, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of her. He was dressed in his best clothes, a dark suit that had been too large 3 weeks ago, but now fit well thanks to Bethany's alterations. His arm was still in a sling, but color had returned to his face and his eyes were bright. "You're beautiful," he said softly. Bethany blushed, smoothing the skirt of her dress. "It's nothing fancy, it's perfect," Finn insisted, crossing to take her hand. "You're perfect." She looked up at him, still marveling at how quickly and completely her life had changed. From the brink of death to the threshold of a new life, all because she had collapsed on this man's porch. "Are you ready?" Finn asked, offering his good arm. Bethany nodded, taking it. "More than ready." They rode into town side by side, Bethany on Daisy and Finn on his gelding, Storm. The day was clear and warm, typical for early summer in Texas. Wildflowers dotted the prairie around them, painting the landscape in bright yellows and purples. The church was a simple white painted building with a small steeple. As they approached, Bethany saw several horses and wagons already outside. Word had spread about the wedding, it seemed. "Quite a turnout," Finn commented, helping her dismount. "News travels fast in these parts." "Does it bother you?" Bethany asked, suddenly nervous about facing a crowd of strangers on what should be an intimate day. Finn shook his head. "Not at all. I'm proud to have these good people witness me marrying the most beautiful woman in Texas." His confidence bolstered her own, and Bethany smiled as they walked toward the church. Inside, perhaps 24 people had gathered, turning to watch as they entered. The preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Johnson, stood at the front, beaming at them. "There's the happy couple," he called. "Come on up then. No sense delaying the Lord's good work." Hand in hand, Bethany and Finn walked down the short aisle. She recognized a few faces from their brief visit to town the day before: the general store owner, the blacksmith and his wife, the sheriff who had saved them from the Blackwells. At the altar, they turned to face each other. Finn took both her hands in his blue eyes steady on hers as the preacher began the ceremony. The words were traditional and timeless, spoken by countless couples throughout history. But to Bethany, they felt new and profound, a sacred promise being made in the aftermath of violence and fear. When the time came for vows, Finn spoke clearly, his voice carrying through the small church. "I, Finn Calloway, take you, Bethany Montgomery, to be my lawfully wedded wife. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Bethany repeated the vows, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. As she spoke the final words, she saw tears gathering in Finn's eyes, matching her own. "The rings." Reverend Johnson prompted. Finn reached into his pocket and produced 2 simple gold bands. He had ridden to the larger town of Preston to purchase them while Bethany was busy with the dress, wanting to surprise her. "With this ring I thee wed," Finn said, sliding the smaller band onto Bethany's finger. It fit perfectly, gleaming in the sunlight that streamed through the church windows. Bethany took the larger ring with trembling fingers. "With this ring I thee wed," she echoed, placing it on Finn's hand. "By the power vested in me," the preacher declared, "I now pronounce you man and wife." He smiled broadly. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Calloway." Finn didn't hesitate, drawing Bethany into a tender kiss that spoke of promises kept and new beginnings. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers, several of the women dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. When they parted, Bethany was laughing through her tears. "Mrs. Calloway," she whispered, testing the sound of her new name. "Mrs. Calloway," Finn agreed, his smile radiant. They turned to face their impromptu guests, who surrounded them with congratulations and well wishes. The sheriff pumped Finn's hand vigorously. "Never thought I'd see the day you settled down, Calloway," he said with a grin. "You got yourself a fine woman there." "Don't I know it?" Finn replied, his arm wrapped protectively around Bethany's waist. To their surprise, the townspeople had arranged a small celebration at the hotel dining room. There was cake and punch, music from a fiddler and his wife on the piano, and plenty of good-natured teasing about newlyweds. Bethany found herself drawn into conversation with several of the local women, who were eager to welcome a new face to their community. "We don't get out to the Calloway place much," the blacksmith's wife, Mrs. Henderson, told her, "but you must come into town for the quilting circle when you can. First Tuesday of each month." "I'd like that," Bethany said, genuinely touched by the offer of friendship. Across the room, Finn was deep in conversation with several of the men, no doubt discussing cattle prices and the prospects for rain. He caught her eye and smiled, a private communication that warmed her from within. As the afternoon wore on, Bethany realized she was experiencing something she had feared lost forever after her father's death, a sense of belonging, of community. These people, strangers just hours ago, had embraced them both without question. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Finn approached her. "We should head back before dark," he murmured in her ear. "It's a long ride." Bethany nodded, saying her goodbyes to the women who had so warmly welcomed her. There were hugs and promises to return soon, invitations to dinner and church services. As they mounted their horses outside the hotel, the sheriff approached one last time. "Safe journey home," he said, "and don't worry about those Blackwell brothers anymore. The one we captured has been sentenced to hang in Preston next month. That gang won't trouble these parts again." "Thank you, Sheriff," Finn said, shaking the man's hand. "For everything." The ride home was peaceful, the couple talking quietly about the day and the kindness of the townspeople. As they crested the final ridge and the ranch came into view, Bethany felt a surge of emotion. This was home now, their home, where they would build their life together. Finn helped her dismount in the yard, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms, mindful of his healing shoulder. "Finn," she exclaimed, laughing. "Your injury is fine," he assured her, carrying her toward the house. "And I aim to carry my bride over the threshold properly." He managed it with only a slight grimace of pain, setting her down gently once they were inside. The house had been repaired in the weeks since the attack, the broken windows replaced, the bullet holes patched and painted over. But more than that, it had been transformed by Bethany's presence curtains at the windows, wildflowers in jars on the table, the scent of home-cooked meals lingering in the air. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," Finn said softly, drawing her into his arms. "Home," Bethany repeated, settling against his chest. The word had new meaning now. It wasn't just a place, but a person. Finn was her home, just as she was his. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other in new ways, their bodies joining as their hearts had already done. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, they spoke of dreams and plans for their future together. "I was thinking we might expand the herd next spring," Finn said, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Build up the ranch bit by bit." "I'd like to expand the garden too," Bethany added. "Grow enough to preserve for winter. And perhaps," Finn ventured, his voice taking on a note of vulnerability, "we might think about adding on to the house. Another bedroom or two." Bethany propped herself up on an elbow to look at him. "For children?" she asked softly. Finn nodded, his eyes searching hers. "If you want that, a family." "I do," she whispered, leaning down to kiss him. "Very much." His arms tightened around her. "Then that's what we'll build toward together." 5 years later, Bethany stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Finn taught their 4-year-old son, James, to sit on his pony. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, a sound that never failed to warm her heart. So much had changed in 5 years. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, the herd growing from Finn's original 20 head to over 100. The house had been expanded twice, first to add a proper kitchen and dining room, then to add 2 bedrooms for their growing family. James had been born in the middle of a spring thunderstorm, with only Finn and the midwife from town to help bring him into the world. He had his father's blue eyes and sandy hair, along with Bethany's stubborn determination. And now, another child was on the way. Bethany rested her hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick vigorously. The midwife suspected it might be twins this time, given how large she was already at 7 months. "Mama, look," James called, beaming with pride as he sat tall in the saddle, Finn's steady hand on his back. "I'm riding like Papa. I see you, sweetheart," Bethany called back. "You're doing wonderfully." Finn glanced up at her, his face breaking into the smile that still made her heart skip. The years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of gray at his temples, but he was more handsome than ever to her. The shadows of war that had haunted him when they first met had receded, replaced by the quiet confidence of a man who had found his purpose. Satisfied that James was steady, Finn passed the pony's lead to the ranch hand they'd hired the previous year, then crossed the yard to join Bethany on the porch. His hand came to rest beside hers on her belly. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Like I'm carrying a future rodeo champion," Bethany replied with a laugh as the baby kicked again beneath their joined hands. Or perhaps two. Finn's eyes widened slightly at the reminder of the midwife's suspicion. "2 babies," he marveled. "Good thing we built that extra bedroom." "We might need another if she's right," Bethany teased. Finn wrapped his arm around her shoulders, drawing her against his side as they watched their son circle the yard on his pony, the ranch hand keeping a careful eye on him. "Did you ever imagine this?" Bethany asked softly. "That day when I collapsed on your porch," Finn was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he admitted. "I was just trying to keep you alive. I couldn't have dreamed that you would bring me back to life as well." Bethany leaned into him, content in a way she had never thought possible after the tragedy that had brought them together. From the ashes of her old life, something beautiful had grown, a family, a home, a love that deepened with each passing day. "Do you remember what you promised me that day?" she asked. When I was unconscious, Finn nodded, his eyes soft with memory. "Forever," he said simply. "I promised you forever. And you've kept that promise," Bethany said, turning in his arms to face him. "Every day." Finn's hand came up to cup her cheek, his eyes full of the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. "And I always will, my love. Forever." As the Texas sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Bethany stood in her husband's embrace, surrounded by the life they had built together. From that desperate moment on the porch to this peaceful evening 5 years later, their journey had been one of healing, growth, and unwavering love. It wasn't always easy. There had been droughts and storms, both literal and figurative. There had been nights when Finn still woke, haunted by memories of war. There had been times when Bethany still grieved for her father. But through it all, they had faced each challenge together, their bond only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. As James's laughter rang out once more, Bethany thought of how a single moment, her collapse on a stranger's porch, had changed the course of her life. How Finn's promise of forever, spoken to an unconscious woman he didn't yet know, had somehow manifested into this rich, full life they now shared. Some might call it chance or coincidence. Bethany preferred to think of it as destiny. "Mama, Papa, look how fast I can go," James called, his little face alight with joy as the ranch hand allowed the pony to trot a few steps. "We see you, son," Finn called back, pride evident in his voice. "You're a natural horseman," Bethany smiled, watching her husband's face as he observed their child. The love there was boundless, a mirror of what she felt in her own heart. "I love you, Finn Calloway," she said softly. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." Finn's eyes met hers, blue and clear as the Texas sky. "And I love you, Bethany Calloway, today, tomorrow, and all the days after." He sealed his words with a kiss gentle and reverent. forever. In that moment, with the sun setting on another day at the ranch they had built together, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that Finn had kept the promise he made that fateful day. He had given her forever, and she had given him the same in return. Their story, which had begun with blood and fear on a weathered porch, had transformed into something beautiful, a testament to the healing power of love and the unexpected ways in which destiny unfolds. From a single moment of compassion had grown a lifetime of happiness, proving that even in the wild and often cruel landscape of the West, true love could not only survive but flourish. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Bethany Montgomery Calloway sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her, wounded and desperate, to the porch of the man who would become her everything. The man who had knelt beside her and promised forever. A promise that, with each passing day, they continued to keep.